and welcome to this week's episode of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself and Pauline Roche and Sweyn will attempt to guide you through the world of online communications in the true fashion of our old and late dearly departed friend John Popham, who started this show, the Dr. Tech Show. And we're joined today by Andy Sandford. So let's go straight into how's the weather where you are. Sweyn, how's the weather where you are?
It's better than it was any recent week. There's a bit of sunshine, lots of clouds. It's rained recently.
Mm-hmm. And Andy, where are you and how's the weather where you are?
So I'm down in Torquay. It's much the same. We've got many seasons in one day at the moment. Bit of sunshine, bit of rain, bit of cold, bit of wind. It's nice. Can't complain at the moment, can you?
That's good to hear. And here in the Midlands, it's pretty much the same. I did get out for a walk this morning, and the sun did break through, so it was always nice to see that happening. So we'll come back to you, Andy, in a few minutes. But in the meantime, we'll press on with our what we're celebrating or commemorating or whatever this week. And actually, this is the first one's a bit of a throwback because last week, the 19th to 23rd was Charity Fraud Awareness Week, which brings together everyone involved in the charity not-for-profit sectors to raise awareness and share good practice in tackling fraud and cybercrime. And obviously that's something on a show like this we'd be conscious of. And this award-winning campaign is led by a coalition of over 40 charities, including the Charity Commission for England and Wales and the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland and the Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator, as well as the Fraud Advisory Panel, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, and various other bodies, including some in the US as well, the IRS and the US National Association of State Charity Officers. And this year's campaign has three core messages: be fraud aware, take time to check, and keep your charity safe. And they're kind of simple but strong messages, I think. I think crooks and people who don't wish us well aren't taking a holiday while it's COVID time. So charities would be wise to make sure they keep that in mind, not to, be careful about who they trust, and especially online, and be extra cautious, I think. And tomorrow, the 27th of October, is World Day for Audiovisual Heritage. And this provides an occasion to raise general awareness of the need to take urgent messages and to acknowledge the importance of audiovisual documents. It serves as an opportunity for UN member states to evaluate their performance with respect to implementing the 2015 recommendation concerning the preservation of and access to documentary heritage, including in digital form. And it also promotes the free flow of ideas by word and image as a representation of our shared heritage and memory. And that's an international celebration. I'm sure we're all engaged in audiovisual work all the time and recognize the need to, even now as well, to kind of be documenting what we're doing in these times for all of us to remember in all parts of the globe. Okay, so we're delighted to be joined by a special guest this morning, Andy Sandford, who's the Director for Improvement at We Are Lean and Agile. And Andy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Sweyn, I think you know Andy a bit better than I do.
Yes, Andy and I seem to have been at lots of online events in common over this past few months. We met first at UK Gov Camp just as the thing broke up and as we all went on our way back home in about 2013. But yeah, no, it's good to see you again, Andy.
Yep.
And Andy is kind of works on delivering improvement, make it more efficient, more effective, and engaging according to his LinkedIn profile. And that's good to hear. And we can learn about that in community.
We learn a lot from LinkedIn, don't we, Pauline?
Yeah, we do. So we encourage our guests to keep it up to date. Andy has a public sector ethos, but he has also worked with community groups. We were talking about this earlier before the show started, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And I was interested to read on your LinkedIn profile, Andy, about your continuous improvement platform that you use, helping organizations to map, model, and improve their processes continually. Because somebody was asking on I think it was my Twitter during the last week about who in our sector is helping charities to think about automating processes so they don't have to keep using valuable staff time, which is the most valuable thing in a charity and community organization, answering the same questions over and over, but instead automating things. So maybe you'll have a view on that. But if we can talk about your experience with community groups and charities, as you were saying earlier, do you want to reprise that, please?
Yeah, of course. So this is a while back. So I worked in public sector for 13 years with Torbay Council. One of the initiatives we were involved in was starting the Torbay Advice Network. We recognised as a council, we're talking a good 10, 15 years ago, how important the sector was in terms of helping us deliver and helping us really, co-support people to make a difference. And one of the challenges we had in Torbay, which wasn't unique, was that there was a number of very small community groups providing really valuable support to people out there, but doing so without the backing, without the backing that large organisations like CAB and maybe Age Concern and others have behind them. So they didn't necessarily have the resources to see the bigger picture. They didn't have access to the knowledge base and the information about what services were out there, what providers were out there. And generally what we were trying to do was raise everyone working in the advice sector within Torbay to a certain level. So we trained, I think it was between 100 and 200 people from various organisations to really quite a complex set of signposting and other information. And we also created a network of, there you go, that's very good to see.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that's there anymore. You know what these initiatives are like. But yeah, we provided information, training and advice to support people, to help them support their users, their attendees, and these were, the traditional kind of just someone at the back of the church hall with maybe a little office and a little computer, and we were trying to give them the right advice, the right guidance, and also connect these groups up a bit as well. It was always quite a challenging thing to do, because the main problem for a lot of these groups is they weren't used to being in the same room because they were all bidding for the same funds. Yeah. So, we had to overcome that first to get people engaged. It was quite a compelling offer, in terms of there was a lot of time and resource that went into it, and a lot of support was given and a lot of training. And it was really good, really successful, in terms of creating that link between the council and other services and the voluntary and third sector. So it was a very interesting project to get involved in. It was one of my first as part of the newly formed sort of customer team. And we were obviously trying to do lots of things within the council with our own services, but really, really understood how all services can come together to support people better. And to be fair, not everyone wants to talk to the council about problems. It can be quite intimidating. We can feel like stuff shirts sometimes to people, it puts them off, or they think we're going to come chasing them if they tell us the real story. So those community groups are so vital in helping support. And let's be honest, how much has COVID shown the value of those community groups? Because I don't know a council across the land that hasn't suddenly really understood how vital they are, and that these community groups have had a way of connecting people and supporting people that just couldn't be done by traditional council services, certainly not within the resources they've got now. You know, we were lucky back then. There were pots of money, you know, there was money within the council. Those sort of situations don't exist anymore. We've got to be more agile, and we've got to be able to deliver where people are. You know, we can't expect people to turn up where we want them, you know.
And that's really a focus of what we've been trying to do over the last few weeks on this show, is to try and help not just community groups, but individuals who might have friends and family who have worked out that where they need to be is somewhere online, but they're not too sure about exactly how or when or how. So it's great to hear that story from Torbay. I think councils across the country probably nowadays have something similar, probably not as well established as that one in Torbay now. I think here locally in Orkney, we rely quite heavily on Voluntary Action Orkney for our relationship between the public sector and the third sector. So it's kind of, and now I now know that Voluntary Action Orkney, after helping with VCSS Camp last week, is one of a number of these types of organisations which provide infrastructure and presence for gathering voluntary groups under their umbrella. And it sounds to me like in Torbay way back then, that's kind of what you were aiming at.
Absolutely, yeah. It was looking to grow and support the sector, really, because bringing them together, bigger picture wise, you know, if you can get a coalition of organisations working together, there's much better funding. And if that can be with the backing of the council and the local health board as well, then you've got a really powerful and compelling message. I was going to just pick up on something that Pauline mentioned earlier in terms of the fraud awareness. I think you're absolutely right. Fraudsters aren't going to sleep. If I've noticed anything, and I'm pretty tech savvy, I'm no expert in any way, shape or form, but the kind of stuff that I'm getting as phishing, you know, just landing in my inbox, is looking more and more and more sophisticated in the last couple of months. I've been quite astounded sometimes, because I've actually looked at a few of these and gone, that would be really easy to click on, you know, really, really easy to click on. And you know exactly it's not true, but so well done now. I think people have had, you know, working from home and being home all the time has obviously given people time to do this, and unfortunately criminals are just the same, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's been a kind of a godsend for them, this lockdown, where they know they've got people's attention online in a much more concentrated form, and the attention of people who aren't as tech savvy as, you know, Andy, you definitely are more tech savvy than you know, hundreds and thousands of other people I know out there. And if you're getting kind of just a twitch of something, then obviously there is something more happening. The same with myself. I put it on my Facebook. Sweyn, you might remember a couple of weeks ago, I got an email purporting to be from Facebook, and you know, even I was like, is this, you know, I'm tired, is this a scam? And luckily my friends came kind of streaming out of the woodwork and said, don't touch that. But is it all too easy? And I am really worried about vulnerable people, and you know, online getting scammed, and you know, it could be really seriously negative for them. Absolutely. and their organizations. I'm
aware locally, again in Orkney, we always have an Orkney story, so this is the one for this week which I've just remembered about, so I'm just going to slot it in here, Pauline. A new initiative in Orkney between the council, police, Citizens Advice, Business Gateway, Age Concern and various other partners, allowing people simply to report scams that they get easily on Facebook, and to try and get a grip locally on what the common ones are, because up until now, you know, it's been a question of relying on publishing them in the paper a week later or something like that. So it's something a bit more reactive, proactive even, in that area. And I think
that's a great example. that's a great model that others could copy.
It's very new, so we'll see how it works.
I'd be keen to see that copied. Sweyn referred to VCSS Camp that we had last week, which is it's a non-conference you may not be aware of. I know you go to other ones, for voluntary sector infrastructure organizations, so umbrella groups for the community and voluntary sector. And this is our 9th one. I've been running them since 2013. When kind of I realized we didn't have anything like that in our sector, and I and 2 other people founded this one. But I think so there are people in infrastructure organizations who are interested in digital and data and kind of using tech for social good and so on, but nowhere near the volume of people in the public sector who have these skills. And we hadn't run one for 2 years, and I'd be keen to run one again in 3 or 6 months, because I think things like fraud are going to become more targeted, and we need to be kind of raising up our game around things like that, just to safeguard people,
Yeah, well, we've already seen lots of stuff around track and trace, and people leapt on that immediately, trying to piggyback off that and con people out of relatively small amounts of money. But it's the cynical nature and the vulnerable people that they're targeting, which is the impact of 40 quid to someone in a dire situation is massive. And I think event organizers need to think heavily about how they communicate with people, especially if they're new to platforms and things like that, about making sure your communication is clear, making sure there's all the sort of right ticks and validations, so that people don't feel like it's spam or things like that.
It's steering away from some of the things that we know scammers do, which legitimate organizations sometimes, occasionally do, but needn't and shouldn't really, to make it very clear that things that look like this are spam and things that look like this are likely to be genuine. Of course, I suppose crooks more and more can copy or pretend to be genuine, but if legitimate organizations manage to present themselves correctly, then it should be easier for everyone to identify who's honest and who's not.
And let's be honest, it's one of the biggest worries with people new to digital, about how do we keep them away from the scammers.
Well, I was rereading one of John Popham's blog posts yesterday, because the question of Christmas is now coming up, obviously, even though we haven't had Halloween. But John did work for a number of years, maybe not last year, but for a number of years previously, on something that he called Connected Christmas, which was basically generalizing his concept of enabling virtual nattering, as he put it. What people want to do is talk to each other, and what he was trying to do was connect people together using technology so that they could talk to each other like this. And I know that in the last few months he was both excited and frustrated that it had suddenly taken off, all of this video stuff, because he's been championing this for many years, but unfortunately he wasn't really able to. His health didn't allow him really to take full part of the explosion of all this. But one thing that was key that had kind of set him back in 2018 was that more and more, when he spoke to older people especially, and of course this is before COVID, so we probably moved on in some ways from that precise reaction, but the reaction he was getting more and more than he'd ever seen before was, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with that. It's just a way of scamming me. This online stuff. I don't want to go online. No, I don't want to, not even to see my grandchildren, not even to meet my friends, not even to have a natter, even if I can't go out, because all they'll do is steal my money. And anyway, my grandchildren, the reason I can't speak to my grandchildren is because they're always on these machines and they're horrible." So he was finding a bit of resistance, a bit of friction there, and I think unless something dramatic happens, unless there's a lot more support to people to try to avoid that sort of thing, we will end up sliding back towards that again as the COVID situation relaxes and winds down, hopefully within the next year or two. So it's really important, and I think one of the things that, and again we say it nearly every week, one of the things that is good to see from the kind of public sector support to people now getting online is that, as well as a device, and as well as, you know, thinking about data, can people afford it and do people have it? There's also in things like Connecting Scotland and Device.now and the Welsh equivalent, there's also a component which is to make sure that there are enough trained people in the, primarily in the voluntary sector, but also in the public sector, to be the kind of digital champions that kind of support people for the people who are landed with this new stuff. And it'll really be one of the success criteria for me for all of these big projects that have kind of reacted to COVID. A big success criterion for me will be: are these digital champions? Are we going to become aware of them as a thing? Are we going to notice that the support available, not just anti-fraud, but everything to do with how you get online safely? Are we going to notice this kind of group of digital champions really change something fundamentally in the way that people expect to be able to be supported? Or will it be another set of initiatives like so many in the past, as you said, Andy, that kind of get set up and then wither after a little while?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there's been a compelling reason at the moment, and we talk to people about improvement, and yeah, it's been brilliant that lots of things have changed really quickly, but that's because there's been a compelling purpose that everyone's been aligned to. So the really important time is now, when we start to look at, we've gone past the stage of this is a quick reaction to a pandemic, into the, well, what are we going to embed and how are we going to change the way we deliver our services? And I think there's all sorts of ways we can be doing it. There's so many opportunities. I think we just got to, keep pushing people to not give up all of the good stuff that's happened. Now, some things that have happened, they're not ideal, and yeah, of course, we're gonna, as soon as we can, resolve those. But I think there's a lot of work to be done in truly embedding it, and I think reinventing the way we do services. We've banged on about digital for 10 years maybe, and some may say public sector, voluntary sector have not come as far as they could have done, and that's probably true in areas, but also lots of people doing amazing stuff. But we really need to sort of push on now and start to say, well, how do we make this just part of the normal, and support people appropriately, I suppose, in the right way. And I think that's important as well. Webinars are one thing, like a traditional webinar talk at people, but like Sweyn mentioned earlier, I think people want to talk to people want to engage with people. That doesn't just happen by putting on a weekly webinar where you talk at. That's not engagement. So it needs some more work and some new models for doing business in the new age. And loads of people have taken on new technology. My parents are in their local WhatsApp group for the roads. That's never happened.
Who would have thought, eh?
Exactly. But and that's been really good, because you can't really be connected to many people, but you can have a shout from a distance at people, sort of thing. And to feel connected has really helped them, because they've been locked down since the very start. They're vulnerable. So
the Christmas thing that came up last week was somebody's had the idea of a bit like the clap for the NHS moment. It's at 8 o'clock on Thursdays or whatever it was. At 12 noon, say, on Christmas Day, they're suggesting everyone goes out with a soft drink or an alcoholic drink and just wishes everybody else Merry Christmas on the day.
Sounds
and it's
good.
not a digital thing, but it put me immediately in mind of John's Christmas work. So I went back to have a reread of some of that. So let's see if that sort of thing for Christmas kind of takes root or takes on a bit of momentum. Who knows?
You've already got me thinking about having a big mass remo on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah,
I've been
what's Remo? What's Remo, Andy?
Oh, so it's just a tool that we use for online events. So it's much more like a traditional event. You're sort of sat at tables and you can move around and you can chat to different people and you kind of make your own environment. I've been thinking for a while, because we have all these camps and they're all specific. And I've kind of been thinking about a no camp of just literally let's get together and let's have the conversations we have, same sort of format, but literally trying to bridge. This isn't about local gov, but you're kind of welcome if you come from this sort of side sector, but it's going to kind of be local gov, or so I'm toying with the idea of throwing some of them out there and just seeing what happens, because so many people that I talk to are feeling, they are just saying it'd just be good to talk to like-minded people. And we did a couple of events with Dorset, and amazing feedback afterwards, because they would normally be very organized and we would allocate people to tables and things like that. And one of them at the end of it actually described the event and said, "Hey, do you know what? It's like a wedding, this is." You never have put those people together by design.
That's a great analogy.
Having moved around the tables, seen the amazing conversations they were having, normally you get the chief execs at a table with particular people, but that just didn't happen, and people just moved around and talked, and the conversation was incredibly rich.
I think the range of settings where the kind of open space principles for organization of events works, it's incredible, the range of, like, that's nearly an internal event that you're talking about there.
Well, it was
yeah. But as you say, I think if you did manage to get something set up that was completely general, that would also work, just in a different way.
Yeah, and it was productive as well, because they were able to sit at tables and work on challenges at the whiteboards and give their views about the direction Digital Dorset is looking to travel. So it was very, very interesting to see, and more people came along. But you've always got that problem of trying to enable everyone to get in.
Yes.
In all of these. And I think, we've got people who are excluded by their work devices as well as, individuals. Sweyn's laughing because, we have this conversation a fair amount, don't we, mate? But
we do.
Yeah, I think organizations have got a lot of work to do about opening up these channels.
Totally agree.
And enabling, because we're all about collaboration now. COVID has shown us that most rapid collaborations, real tangible collaborations, delivering outcomes, happening so fast. So
the way I put it, the fact that people can't interact with either their peer group or their customer group or whatever it is, using the tools that those peers and those customers are using. So whether it's Zoom or Remo or Jitsu or Google Meet or whatever, if there's a tool that's very popular among the users of a service or among the peers of a service, then we want to find a way to use it. We don't want to say, no, we can't use that because it's not secure or because of some other reason, or we can't support it or whatever. We need to be, it's just a very specific way of being where the people are.
I'm just picked up that story that you mentioned, Andy, Digital Dorset, and apparently were announced as the winner of the Digital Skills Award, the Connected Britain Awards. Great to hear.
That's great.
Again, sorry, Sweyn, I just picked this up as Andy was chatting.
This is exciting.
And the award was given for the work going across the county to make sure everyone help everyone in Dorset make the most of the digital tools available to them and make sure Dorset becomes a truly digital place. So it's great to see that happening and not be normalized, as part of what a county's doing. And if we get a chance to share some of the stories, they mentioned digital champions as well, which is the digital unite model, which is I find a great model, and kind of chimes with what you've been saying earlier, Andy. Then it's good to see that happening, and we should flag it up, because we know from our experiences in the public sector that once one public sector body does something, others like to learn from it, shall we say.
Absolutely. I mean, the work that Dorset is doing is massive. Digital Leaders Week last week, they held about 70 sessions, I think, across the week. And they were really interesting stuff, people from Sky and, really big companies, as well as Dorset and Meditate and all sorts of different events. The event we did a couple of months ago was actually them refreshing their vision. So it was sense checking it. They had a lovely rich picture, which we loaded into all of the whiteboards for the tables as a starter. And they just asked 3 questions, is it still relevant? What's missing? What would you like to see added? And they had all sorts of really good speakers in there talking about the art of the possible, from 5G right through. So it was just a really good day, and kind of demonstrates their ongoing commitment to the cause, to go back and refresh it. They tried this technology for the first time in a public facing event, which, in itself is quite a brave move. Really good stuff. And like you say, that stuff spreads and people start to use it. And I think there's some great stuff going on down there.
It's great to hear things happening in, the places in the country where they don't get that much publicity about what they're doing digitally. Like London obviously has lots of resources, and the southeast, but other places maybe not so much. So it's good to hear that happening. We cover, obviously we get plenty of Scottish stories on this this show, but also Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham. We want to profile and highlight the great work that's going on other places in the country.
Something I found working in improvement is often it's the smaller organisations that are very much more innovative with their approaches, because they're working with limited resources. They have to be innovative. They have to be different, to be able to meet the demands. They've got to work differently. So, yeah, I think it's really important that this stuff does get an opportunity, and more than just, the traditional London councils that you'll hear about 5 or 10 times a year at most events, kind of thing, which isn't a problem. But, everyone needs to be able to get some recognition and actually, share good practice and share learning. More important than good practice.
It's very much, in some ways, Scotland can be looked on as a bit similar to London in some ways. It's the same number of local authorities, which is always amusing. There's a bit more of a variety, perhaps, but it's a natural, reasonable sized group of areas to work together on many things, and increasingly through the digital office and otherwise, we're trying to make sure that we do that. So, as you say, so that we can share amongst ourselves, even before we start showing off to the rest of the UK, what works and what doesn't.
Shall we have a look at some of these stories we picked up, Sweyn?
Yes.
I'm sure Andy can comment on them as we go along as well.
You're going to remind me which one the first one is.
The first one is about many US students still lacking home internet. And I think we think that the US is very far ahead of, of the rest of the world on the internet. And actually, we're picking up this story that says that it's not. This story from edweek.org says that, slightly more than 2/3 of district leaders and principals say they need government funds for purchasing hotspots or home Wi-Fi for families. Only 11% of respondents to a survey said all students in their school or district have the level of home internet access they need to fully participate in remote instruction. And there was a September poll by Morning Consult and the Internet Innovation Alliance, where 95% of voters said internet access for students and teachers is a problem, and more than 60% said broadband access more generally should be an immediate concern for Congress. And interestingly, approximately half of Americans are even willing to pay a little more money if it means extending broadband access to those who don't currently have it. I love hearing that kind of story where, you know, people for whom it will have an effect on their purse and on their popularity are willing to support you know, broadband, recognizing it's just it's a must-have. It's not a luxury anymore.
No, I totally agree. It's so important with homeschooling being what it is for at least, I don't know, let's be optimistic, another 6 months. There's so many challenges brought about by not having access, and those, you know, of course it all matches up to people who already have challenges as well. So it's sort of the double treble whammy of, if you're probably a little bit hard up on your luck, then you're also probably not going to have the same access to tech or connection that others do, and you know, the gap's going to get wider. So I think it's a huge challenge across the world to do that. And I know Sweyn is a major proponent of sorting these problems out and getting everyone connected. In one
way. I mean, there's many ways to do this. Yes.
That's why we get on well together, because we have a similar worldview.
Absolutely so.
Yeah. So the next story you picked up was from IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, and they have signed up to 2 documents addressing the digital divide. The first one is to call on governments to act to support investment in wider connectivity and the libraries that help users make the most of it. And the second represents a pledge to do all in our power as libraries to promote digital inclusion as open to wider signatures. And, you know, as we'll all know on this call, libraries have a proven role in helping to bring people online. And we know that when public libraries offer internet access, gaps in usage between old and young, employed and jobless, and rich and poor are lower. And we know that students, as we've said, without internet access at home, make more intensive use of libraries than their peers. And because of closures of libraries and kind of cutting down on services available, this is causing an issue for people. It's not just providing cost-effective ways of improving home connectivity, but also ensuring people benefit from the content and skill supports that libraries provide. So it'd be good to see governments and, you know, putting their support behind, as we've just said about the US, putting their support behind libraries to enable them to keep offering the support that they have been.
I think it's interesting.
I mean, libraries. Go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say, it kind of takes me back to a conversation I was having with some social landlords, and how they were highlighting that even now, you know, the building of a new estate or building of new houses, broadband isn't a requirement. So, you know, even now we're building houses where there isn't a connection right to your door or anything like that, which in this world just seems madness. That seems like a policy shift that should just happen, you know. These sorts of things should be covered. I mean, I could be out of date with that one, but it wasn't that many years ago. It was only a couple of years ago that I was having that conversation, and haven't heard that that's been changed. But let's be honest, that's the way the world is, you know. Yeah. How can you're going to need cable to the door anyway, because of all the things that are going to be running on the Internet of Things and things like that to support people. And, you know, social housing as well. Obviously, there's a massive amount of ways that tech can help support people in their own homes and to have a a better life. Let's be honest. Let's not do it down.
And that brings us neatly on to the next story, which is titled "Digital Route to Levelling Up in a Post-COVID Scotland." And this is from the Herald Scotland, and they're pointing out that the story writer says that during this time of enforced social distancing and remote working, faster journey times to empty city centres don't go cut it anymore. It feels like an outdated irrelevance, and by focusing myopically on cities, the risk is that we're overlooking policy interventions that would deliver long-term efficiency and well-being benefits beyond the pandemic. So in Scotland, the suggestion is that refocusing economic development on digital rather than physical infrastructure could be transformative. In countless roles and sectors, everyone knows that digital work is still work. Some things obviously are better done face-to-face, but organizations large and small have been able to function effectively via remote meetings and digital decision-making. So, the question is, why squander the wider benefits this development brings? I think we can all, I'm living in the Midlands since 1984, and they're building HS2 all around me where I live or nearby. And I'm sorry, cutting 20 minutes off a journey to London, that's not really progress for me. That's not what's going to make a difference to the people I serve and work with. I'd much rather to spend the money on connectivity, devices, and digital skills.
Yes. And again, that was one of John Popham's great themes as well. He was a passionate opponent of spending all that money on HS2. So yeah, we ought to mention that. Scotland, currently the Scottish Government is, I suspect, behind this in the Herald, this article that we've found this week. I suspect behind that lies partly that the Scottish Government is doing a big consultation exercise about the Scottish digital strategy post-COVID. So it's quite good timing for that, I think. And I expect most organisations, most regions, most nations will do the same at some point. But it looks like it'll be a very thoroughgoing review of priorities and focus. And I think that argument there about focusing more on digital investment than on physical investment is perhaps very timely.
I mean, HS2, let's be honest, was a crazy idea when it came out. In a post-COVID world, it just seems like billions down the drain. And it's really interesting, Pauline, to hear you, who, are one of the few people who could maybe benefit from a slightly quicker train journey. It's just never made any sense to me. I would rather they had connectivity on trains, and it wasn't like going back to the 90s or something in terms of connectivity. That would be a better investment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, when I was traveling to London on a regular or semi-regular basis, I chose to go on a slower train, the Chiltern line, because they provide free Wi-Fi, and it was a much more comfortable journey, better trains and everything. But that's my opinion. But the free Wi-Fi on board made all the difference to me, and I was quite happy to spend an extra half an hour getting to London, because I had Wi-Fi.
Absolutely. And similarly, I live away in the north of Scotland. I have been known to take the train from the far north coast of Scotland to Inverness, it's about 140 miles by train. I think it's 110 miles on the road, because the train still follows all the rivers and there's been no improvements for, ever. But as soon as Wi-Fi came in, it was worth the extra hour or so on the train, because you could do stuff on the way as opposed to the bus or driving it. God help us.
Yeah, so again, neatly, we're brought on to another story, and this was a reaction to a tweet from a government minister, Matt Hancock, who tweeted about that the government is providing 11,000 iPads to care homes to enable residents to connect with loved ones, which is obviously very beneficial to them. But somebody pointed out, Jordan Forge is the Twitter handle of the person who responded, pointing out that you could have provided 40,000 Samsung tablets for the same price, they would be just as effective, or 60,000 Doro Android phones with video capability and large screens and even SOS buttons. And this is something, again, on this show, Andy, we talk about from time to time, that, you know, people mention that they use the word iPad and tablet sometimes interchangeably. And there is still a lack of awareness of the price, sometimes of the price of these devices, and that you can get just as good for what you want. You know, people say, oh, I want an iPad. And then I say to them, well, what do you want it for? And they say, well, making, you know, Zoom calls and emails and stuff. And I say, look, you know, you don't need to spend whatever the amount is that you spend on an iPad. You could get just as easily get a very affordable tablet or several tablets for you and your family for the same price.
Exactly.
Have you got a view on that?
I as you were reading out that initial story, I was thinking exactly that tweet in my head, going, why iPads? You know, you're overspecking, you're overspending, and you're under delivering as a result. For simple things, why an iPad? I mean, I was NHS Hack Day down in Cardiff, one of the last events I was able to go to, and they were messing around with the Facebook portals, or not messing around. One of the projects was about how could we use that? Is that a valid tool? Can that support people in their homes? And can we hook it up to various things? And, you know, irrespective of what you think of Facebook as a company, I think we need to be clever about this, and the cost doesn't have to be high. You know, I would go for much more penetration rather than better devices, because we can help more people. It's a simple equation for me. Who can we help? And you know, there's all sorts of stats about, I think the average household is about 1,300, 1,400 quid better off if they are connected, just through, you know, the deals that they can get access to that you just don't know about if your only means of communication is phoning. So let's start.
We've covered that in the recent shows as well. Yeah. And we talked about Portal as well. John was very keen on the idea of Portal. We never had an actual demonstration, but we talked about the availability of them and how they might suit people in care homes where they don't want to be fiddling with too many buttons and you know, kind of gizmos. And a device that kind of you can put on top of your TV or a sideboard or whatever, and it follows you around the room, has a lot of advantages for people who aren't digitally skilled, you know.
Yeah, you've got to make these things as easy as possible. And I'll be honest with you, if you're mixing up an iPad and then there might be a computer or a laptop about, which is probably Microsoft, straight away you're expecting them to understand two very, very different operating systems. Having switched between the two, as someone who's pretty competent with tech, it's a big change. It's a big set of learning you have to take on. You almost have to unlearn anything that you knew about the old device to relearn it in a slightly different way. And you know,
I couldn't agree with you more. My mum's on an iPad, so when I go to visit her, and she's not 40 or 50 anymore. Then, you know, it's me kind of trying to remember or trying to intuit from what I know, because all my devices are Windows, you know, how to help her. I mean, I can understand the kind of usability. It's a good user experience, I think, on an iPad, but it's a matter of getting used to it. And you could just as easily get used to a tablet or some other, you know, cheaper tablet. Yeah. Okie doke. So the next story is, and we're not going to have time to finish all our stories today, so we'll have some for next week. But this one is from a women's magazine called Elle, which is, you know, not somewhere.
We've not had a story from Elle before.
No, well, exactly. And I wanted to pick this one up because when you find stories about what's happening in lockdown and kind of digital divide in lockdown happening in kind of mainstream, you know, publications like this, you realize that it's reaching a far wider audience and affecting far more people, and it will have more impact, I think, than some of the stories that we pick up in perhaps more obscure places. So this was one where there's a number of stories in this, but it just kind of goes through, I don't think I can go through the whole thing, but it's basically saying that lockdown without internet is much harder. And then the writer Olivia Blair goes on to explore stories for a few people who kind of don't have access to the internet and didn't have it when lockdown happened. And some of them are domestic violence, where people are fleeing, of a violent marriage and worried about will they have, be able to communicate with people and get the services that they need. The person that the first part of the story, had no phone and no internet in this the flat that she found, and she was using her neighbour's Wi-Fi to access vital information. But there was that risked her safety, and her neighbours weren't too happy about it either. So she wasn't getting the information that she needed. And it goes on to talk about 93% of households having access to the internet, according to the ONS in 2019. Apparently it's up to 96% in January and February of this year. But over lockdown, obviously, it's been clearly identified, if it wasn't before, that there still are large swathes of the country without access, which is 1.9 million households. So, not everybody can do the FaceTiming or whatever that the government seems to think they have. It's, now, of course, following the rise in cases and more lockdowns, even more people are going to be, offline or under pressure. People are on, kind of can't afford maybe to pay for the device or the access. The universal credit has to be applied for online, and some people haven't been able to do that, especially with also libraries closing as a lot of people use libraries to access their digital capacity. It goes through a number of stories about other people. People see Wi-Fi like water. You turn the tap on and it's there, says one researcher. And some people think it's just old people who are missing out, but it's not. It's lots of other people. The story says average internet costs are around £30-35 per month, and for some people that's just too high a price. And it refers to a story from the Carnegie Trust, which found that in 2014, more than a third of households in the low socioeconomic groups lacked internet access. And in Scotland, where the group is based, just over half who had an annual income of households who had an annual income of between 6,000 and 10,000 had the internet at home. And it goes on to talk about other organizations who are finding that there are difficulties for people. Schools, they're sending homework home with children, or they're kind of trying to help children online. But children may have a device at home, but they're sharing it with their siblings or with other family members. So it's not as easy as people seem to think it is. So it is something we're going to keep talking about as
great
the
article.
show goes on.
It's kind of a summary for the general reader of almost everything we've been trying to say the past few weeks, and so many others have been trying to say the same things too. It's a question of resources, and it's a question of availability and including everyone in having access, not just to being online for the sake of it, but to actually be supported to use being online as a tool to improve their lives.
That's a really powerful article, I think, because that's just made me think. I don't know how I would have coped, mentally, if I didn't have the internet during lockdown. I'm not saying just you think switch that off, and then what is there, in terms of interaction?
Yeah.
There was that story last week as well about schools. I think headmasters, mistresses were reacting to the lack of laptops they're now getting. I think they're getting 20% of what they were promised.
Yeah.
And they're being told just hand them around. And you're kind of like, you're either serious about this or you're not. And if you're serious about it, then crack on and get the laptops, and they don't have to be, again, we're back to that conversation. They don't have to be the best laptop in the world. You just have to be capable,
Yeah. Well, we've had Chris Ashworth and Ross McCullough on a previous show talking about Reboot, which is a scheme to kind of bring devices that are being used back into reuse by community groups. They've devised a playbook so people don't have to work through the process if they want to set up projects like that. And we're hoping to, keep an eye on that and revisit it as time goes on, and see what's happening around the country. And in fact, our guest next week, Rachel Connor, is talking about this very thing: laptops in schools, and wanting to address that deficit. So we're looking forward to hearing more about that. Sweyn, I know we're coming to the end of the hour. I just wanted to finish maybe on this story from the Carnegie Trust, which I referred to actually in that story I just talked about as well from Elle. And they have been, trying to combat and limit digital exclusion. They've done 10 years apparently experience of looking at this, and they've come up with 12 steps to eliminate digital exclusion. So I think it's worth us having a look at that. If you're able to bring up the story, it's kind of they've done a 1-page 12 recommendations for action, which I think would be invaluable to anybody in local authorities or the voluntary sector trying to address this issue. And if I just kind of go through them, we can come back to individual ones. So starting with commit to digital inclusion strategies, prioritize co-production, collect quality digital data, establish a robust baseline, embed across public services, align with anti-poverty efforts, measure program impacts, regulate for online harms, invest and build capacity, champion the role of business, innovate for inclusion, and ensure a public safety net. So I think, it's kind of, people need to hear the things like that. Sometimes you just need a roadmap, don't you, to kind of help you to get where you need to get to with this issue. In Birmingham, we're looking at a digital strategy for the city, and I'm sure other cities are as well. And it'd be good to hear more about that. Andy, have you got any comments on that kind of any of those particular aspects of digital inclusion? Any of them jump out at you?
No, I think it's really useful to have a framework for people to start to work from, isn't it? And a checklist. Obviously I look at processes. I'm a great fan of the checklist to help you get started. And I think it's fantastic that you've got organizations doing the research like this, which again needs to be shared so that people are aware these resources are there as a starting point, and you're not having to try and reinvent the wheel yourselves.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
That's really important, because for most organizations, thinking these things through is not part of the main thing that they're trying to get done, but it can add such a huge dimension to what any organization does if you're able to plug this in.
And I think having as I was able to bring it up on the screen there, the 12 recommendations. I think having something simple like this, because people are busy, they haven't got time to kind of go over and over lots of things. There's some really good advice and information there, and I think that's one we'll be coming back to again and again.
I think the program impacts is always so vital as well, and something we're very bad at traditionally, understanding the real impact of what we've done and being able to quantify that. We do need to be able to do that so that the next time we go forward, we can get funding easier, because we can demonstrate with a small thing, we did this, we achieved these tangible things. The baseline is so important there as well, isn't it?
I think we'll be coming back to you about this, Andy, again, if you don't mind. You've been a fantastic guest. We've had a great time, and you've got a wealth of knowledge, I think, to share with other people. So thanks a million for coming on the show, and good luck, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. Thanks for having us. It's been fun. Andy.
And I think that's about all we have time for.
I think so today. Thanks, everybody, and greetings to everybody in Birmingham and Hope Radio, and we'll see you again next week.